how you were attached. But for a person to become a Christian or a disciple of Christ, they turned their back on all of these things. So they found themselves completely alienated by family. Imagine waking up one day and you make one decision and your mother, your father, your grandparents, your aunties, your uncles, your cousins, even your brothers and sisters say, we want nothing to do with you anymore. You may have been living with these people under the same roof, eating off the same table, doing all the same things, and all of a sudden they tell you, look, because of this one decision, you now have to move out on your own. We want nothing to do with you. This is the circumstance that a lot of people face in becoming a Christian. It wasn't a decision made lightly. I think sometimes here in America we've cheapened what the conversion to a Christian really means. But in this day and age, it was a lifestyle change, a complete lifestyle change. You were cutting yourself off from people that you had spent your entire lifetime around. And that's what was happening. You had all these people who converted to Christianity, but suddenly they had nowhere to go. They couldn't spend time with their loved ones anymore because their loved ones weren't really their loved ones anymore. Or anytime they saw their loved ones, they were always telling them, oh, well, you've fallen into sin and you must repent. When the reality of what they had found was the fulfillment of everything that they had been taught. But some didn't see it that way. And because of this, they were cast out. So now you have people who have been cast out of their own community. Where do they go? They went to the community that had been developed around them, that had been suddenly created around them because of the outpouring of the Holy Spirit. Suddenly here's this new Christian community, this community of believers, people who believe just like they did, who understood the issues that they were going through, who understood the pain that they were feeling at being cast out of their own families for this decision that they had made. So it says they gave themselves to fellowship and to the breaking of bread. They had been disowned for the decision to follow Christ. But they had fallen into a new family that was willing to accept them for who they were, willing to accept them because they had made the same decision, the same choice that individual had made. So they spent time with one another. They spent time, they hung out with each other. They learned about one another. They became a new family. In addition, there's also, if you look at Matthew 26 and 41, it tells us that the spirit is willing and the flesh is weak. Galatians 5:17 tells us that the flesh desires what is against the spirit. These people had just experienced one of the greatest changes in their entire life. Not only had they been cast out from their families, but they had been joined to a new one. On the other side of that, there's a lot of newness that comes with the conversion to a life of Christ. And it's not one that our flesh takes to at all. You can't even say the flesh takes lightly to becoming a Christian. The flesh doesn't like being a Christian at all because it goes against everything that's in our flesh. When our flesh would tell us that, hey, if a pretty woman walks past you and your eyes happen to wander, oh, that's just natural. But then the Spirit is telling us, look, you don't do that, because to look upon a woman with lust in your heart, you committed adultery with her. Go counter to everything about who we are. So, one thing that they needed even more than they needed this sense of family, they needed a sense of accountability. Someone that I could be accountable to. Someone that I could look to. Someone that's going to hold me accountable, someone I can hold accountable. Someone that I can look to and say, look, man, I think you kind of, getting off track a little bit. But let's bring it back. And we'll be able to do so in such a sense of love that it was not offensive. We're called not to, even in this day and age, we're called not to separate ourselves. Sometimes people, and I hate hearing it all the time. People are always talking about, well, I don't get into, organized religion. I don't think I have to, spend time in a church around a whole bunch of other Christians or so-called Christians. Some of them are hypocrites anyway. And I don't think that I need to, spend all this time going to church. I can worship where I am. Sure, you can worship where you are. But in worshiping where you are, you have put yourself by yourself. That makes you vulnerable. Who's going to hold you accountable? Who can you hold accountable? Who can you look to and say that, okay, my life is lining up not with his life, but with Christ? And who's going to be able to look at you and say, look, your life is lining up with Christ, or your life is not lining up with Christ? Who can you trust? Don't put yourself out there. Don't stand off by yourself assuming, oh, hey, I can worship by myself. Yes, you can worship by yourself, and you are encouraged to worship by yourself. We're all encouraged to find a way to worship by ourselves, but we're also called to commune with one another. Why? Because you're weak by yourself. There's an old saying, I don't know where it came from. It said, no man is an island. We need the support of others. If we're going to make it in this faith walk, we need the support of others. We need others around us who are going to rally to our cause when we need them. People that we can call on when we're struggling. So, who can you call on in the middle of the night when you're having a hard time, when your faith is being shaken to the core and you don't know what to do? Who can you reach out to? If you've separated yourself, you have no one. Which is why the people gave themselves over to fellowship, and notice the Bible also says to the breaking of bread. We eat together. During this time period, people ate together. It gave them a chance to discuss the goings on of their lives. Who can you go to? Who can you talk with? Who can you sit down and share who you are, who you really are, what you're really struggling with, and to find a way to overcome? People gave themselves over to fellowship and to the breaking of bread. Number 3 says that they gave themselves to prayer. Now this is very important. The Bible is replete with scriptures extolling the virtues of prayer. I mean, it just crying out the virtues, the wonderful connection that people have to God through prayer. As a matter of fact, there's over 500 verses in the Bible that mention prayer and mention the virtue of prayer, the reason for prayer, the way to pray. With that many verses dedicated to prayer, apparently it's pretty important. Prayer is how we communicate with God. It's how we ask him to look out for us, how we ask him to take care of us, how we even complain to God. And yes, God does allow us to complain. He doesn't allow us to question him or to challenge who he is, but he does allow us to complain. You shouldn't make a habit of it, but we are allowed to complain, and sometimes we do. Anybody ever had one of those "why me, Lord" moments? Going through something, you just can't figure why me. Of all the people who this could have happened to, why me? We're allowed to do that, but it's how we communicate with God. Prayer is so important because it's how we reach out to God. It's how we touch his heart. These people, they dedicated themselves to prayer. Another reason they dedicated themselves to prayer is because imagine living your entire life being told that there's a certain time of year that we're supposed to go, not even go before God, but go before another man so that he can go before God for you. Imagine how heart-wrenching that could be if you did something that you felt horrible about right after one of those times of the year. Now you gotta wait a whole year to get it off of you. You spend that next year nervous, scared to go outside, afraid something might fall and hit you in the head and kill you, and now you're gonna be condemned forever. Why? Because I prayed some dude prayed for me last week, but I gotta wait till next year for him to pray for me again to get this off of me. And you have these people who are suddenly being told, you don't have to wait for the priest to go to God for you. You can go to him for yourself. You can commune with the God of the universe for yourself. You can ask him for what you have need of for yourself. You can get this stuff off of you for yourself. I imagine that these people suddenly having this freedom to go to God and to be able to reach out to him and express their love and their affection and sometimes even their confusion over what God was allowing to happen in their lives. I imagine that these people were excited about being able to reach out to God in this manner. And because of that, they spent time in prayer. Prayer is incredibly important. Incredibly important. And I think sometimes we minimize the importance of prayer. But the reality is, prayer is what helps us to sustain. Prayer is what helps us to maintain. I mean, if you had to literally feel like you were going through everything by yourself with no one to talk to, no one who could do anything for you, how lonely of a feeling would that be? Some of you have already experienced it. You felt like you were going through it all by yourself. You felt like you were dealing with your problems all by yourself. And it was a weight that was too much to bear. It was going to cripple you. It was going to break you down until there was nothing left. But I'm here to tell you that Jesus Christ died so that you wouldn't have to bear that pain. So you wouldn't have to bear that pressure. So you wouldn't have to stand up under it all by yourself. And then he turned around and opened up an ability called prayer for you to be able to commune with the God who made you and knows about all your mess. Number 4 comes out of the 45th verse. And this is one of those that people get real touchy about. And I think sometimes it's because we have a lack of understanding of what was truly intended from this. Verse 45 tells us that they blessed the church financially. Now, this is a different time, and I want us to understand. This verse says that the people sold their possessions and distributed it to them that had need. Allow me to take this moment to say that neither I nor Blueprint Ministries is advocating you going out selling all your stuff and giving it to Blueprint Ministries because this said so or I said so. I am not advocating that. Under no circumstance am I advocating that. Now, if the Spirit of God comes to you and tells you to sell something and give the proceeds to the church, I'm not going to stop you. But be it known, that's not what I'm advocating. And all I can pray is that if you decide to do something like that, that Blueprint Ministries would have the grace and the God-given wisdom to steward those funds in a God-honoring way, in a way that blesses the multitude. But that's not what I'm telling you to do. I'm not saying go out and empty your bank account and bring it to the church. This is not a cult. Just wanted to get that out of the way. But the reason the people did this plays back into the culture of the time. You had some people who they owned their own stuff. You know, they were considered wealthy for their time. They had stuff. They had a house. They had land. They had, livestock. They had these different things. But you had some people who converted to Christianity, who converted to being a disciple of Christ, who they made it out with nothing but the clothes on their back. They didn't own anything. They worked for somebody. They were the third kid back. They didn't have an inheritance. They didn't have anything, and they hadn't reached the point where they could receive their inheritance from their family. So because they made this decision to turn to Christ, they were turned out away from their family with nothing. They had nothing. And this is a person who would become a vagabond on the street. But because of the love of the fellowship, you had people who had substance who said, you know what, I'm gonna sell it. Give it to the church. So that this new community, this new Christian community can become self-sufficient. So that those who don't have anything can at least have something. So that those who would normally be made to suffer can at least have something that will allow them to continue living by some measure. And that's what people did. You had people who had things, who had property, that they sold this property and they would just give it to the apostles. They gave it to the apostles and they told them, look, this is for the upbuilding of the church. This is for the upbuilding of this new Christian community. Because we understand that there are some people who are suffering. The church has always been about benevolence. The church has always been about taking care of those who would normally struggle, who would normally fall through the cracks. Where do you think our foreign missions come from in this country? It comes from the same heart that originally came from people selling their own goods to take care of somebody else.